everyone. Welcome to Stats Rescue 911. My name is Lynn. In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to analyze a significant interaction effect using tests of simple main effects. And in this particular two-way ANOVA, it is an independent ANOVA because both factors are between subjects. All right, so again, we're going to look at a significant interaction effect in a two-way independent ANOVA. All right, before we get started, there are a few things that you really should know about, and that is the difference between a between versus within subjects factor, how to do a two-way independent ANOVA, and that is in a previous video clip I have posted. The difference between main effects and interaction effects, marginal means versus cell means, post hoc tests, how to do a one-way independent ANOVA. Now, I will walk you through this, so if you don't know how to do it or if you're a bit shaky on it, I will be walking you through it, albeit a little fast. How to do an independent t-test, again, I'll do that with you as well. And it's helpful if you know what Y error bars are and confidence intervals. All right, so a bit of background here. We are working with the same data set as we were for the two-way independent ANOVA. And in this particular data set, we were looking at two factors. We were looking at sex and what I called a horror movie factor, whether people reported loving horror movies, liking them, or hating them. Both of these factors are between subjects, so different people in each level, men and women, different groups of people. Same thing, love, like, and hate is between subjects. That is, the people who said they love horror movies are different from the people who said that they like them, and there's a different group of people who say that they hate them. So that's between subjects. All right, and so what we found in the two-way independent ANOVA is a significant interaction effect. So when we looked at the means for each of these cells or treatment combinations, we discovered that the effect of sex on self-reported fear scores depends on the type of attitude they had towards the movies, horror movies. Another way of saying it is that the effect that horror movie attitudes have on self-reported fear scores depend on whether you're a man or a woman. All right, so we'll look at this a little more closely here. This is what we found in the two-way independent ANOVA, and again, we can see that there are differences between men and women, but these differences depend on whether they said they loved horror movies, liked them, or hated them. Another way of looking at this is if we just looked at these blue bars, these are the men. All right, so this is what the men reported in terms of their fear scores, but it depended again on whether they loved, liked, or hate horror movies. And then finally, the red bars are the women. And if we just look at the women, we can see that whether they have self-reported fear scores that are very high or low depends on whether they love, like, or hate horror movies. So we do have an interaction effect here. It was significant. So we now need to find out which means are different from which, because we have a grand total here of 6 means. And there's 2 ways of doing that. Let's look at this first way. Here what we're going to look at is the simple main effect of sex within love. Now, that does sound a little kinky here, but we're talking about love of horror movies, and sex is male-female. All right, so what we're going to do with this test of simple main effects is we are going to see if men and women are significantly different when they say they love horror movies. So that will be one separate test, and that's going to be an independent t-test because we have 2 means and different people in each group. So we're going to run an independent t-test on these 2 means to see if they're significantly different. Then we're going to look at these 2 means And again, it's this time looking at the difference between men and women, but for those who said that they like horror movies. That would be the simple main effect of sex within like. And that'll be an independent t-test. And then finally, we will look at the difference between men and women, but this time it's just going to be for those men and women who said they hate horror movies. And that's going to be a simple main effect of sex within hate. So we've got 3 independent t-tests here to run, all right, to test the simple main effect of sex within the different types of movies. Just as a little trick here, when you're trying to figure out what is being compared to what, if you look at the word that follows simple main effect, so simple main effect of whatever factor is here, whatever comes next, that's the means you're comparing. So sex means we're comparing men and women. Okay, so those are the means being compared. And then the last variable here, the second variable, tells you the level that they're being compared within. So I tell my students, think of within as being only for. So you're comparing the means of sex, but only for the love group. Here you're comparing the means of sex, but only for the like group. And then here you're comparing the means of sex, but only for the hate group. So what we're going to need to do to perform these 3 independent t-tests is we're going to have to tell SPSS to just select, first of all, the love group, okay? And we do that with select cases, and I'll show you how. But we're going to tell SPSS only look at the love group and then run the independent t-test. Then we're going to tell it to only look at the like group and run the independent t-test. And then only look at the hate group and run the independent t-test. Okay? Now that would be certainly one test of simple main effect that we would want to look at, but there is another set of tests of simple main effects that might prove useful, and I'll show you that in this next slide. So here, instead of comparing men and women, what if we just isolated the men? The men are the blue bars. So forget the red bars for a minute. Just look at the blue. All right, so we've got, these are the men who love horror movies, the men who like horror movies, and the men who hate horror movies. Wouldn't it be interesting to see if these 3 means are different from each other? So that would be the simple main effect of, now what are we comparing? We're comparing this time love, like, and hate. So it's the simple main effect of horror group or horror attitude within, or remember the trick, only for men. All right, so this simple main effect would compare these 3 means, love, like, and hate, and only for men because these are the men in the study. Now, because we have 3 means and different people in each group, this would be a one-way independent ANOVA. And if that one-way independent ANOVA is significant, then we'll need to run post hoc tests to see which mean is different from which. All right, and then once we finish that, we would next look at just the women in our study, so the red bars. And we would want to look at women who say they love horror movies, women who like them, and women who hate them. So now we're just looking at the red bars. Whoops, the red bars. Okay, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me go back to that slide. Okay, so if we're looking at just the red bars, that would be the simple main effect of horror group because that's what we're comparing, love, like, and hate. And we're doing it only for, within, remember, only for women in the study. So to do these one-way independent ANOVAs, we're going to have to first select the men, run the one-way independent ANOVA, follow it with post hoc tests if necessary, and then we'll have to select just the women, run the one-way independent ANOVA, and then if that's significant, we'll look at post hoc tests. Okay, so that means we're ready to look at the SPSS file and run the test of simple main effects. We'll start with comparing men and women separately for each type of movie. So to do that, we're going to have to tell SPSS, just look at one movie at a time. So to do that, we go to Data, select Cases, and then we go to what I call the big if. We're giving SPSS a condition, who to select. So again, we want to select based on movies. So horror is the name of the movie factor, the horror movie attitude. So you move that over. And then you say equals 1. Now, oops. Let's see, I think my numlock wasn't on. That doesn't help. Well, let's just move it over. Let's move it back and start again. Really doesn't like that. Let's do this one more time. The big F. Okay. So we're going to take horror. We're going to move it over. And then we're going to say equals, and this time I'm going to make sure my numlock is on, equals 1. Now, we have to remember how we coded the horror movie factor. In SPSS, the program doesn't understand love, like, and hate. It understands 1, 2s, and 3s. So let's see if we can figure that out here. No, I'm going to have to go to variable view. Oh, it's going to be goofy on me here. Let's figure out how we coded love, like, and hate. And it looks like that's exactly what we did. Love, like, and hate is 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So let's go back and tell SPSS to select just the people who loved horror movies. So again, go to if, the big if, horror equals 1. And that tells SPSS that you only want the people who said they love horror movies. So go to continue and then OK. If we were to look at our data set, all right, go over here, you can see that hate has been crossed out, like has been crossed out. The only people that we've kept are people who said that they loved horror movies. All right, so now that we're just looking at people who love horror movies, we can compare men and women on their fear scores. So we're going to go to Analyze, and it's an independent t-test. So you go to Compare Means, Independent t-test, and let's see, Grouping Variable, that is the independent variable. So that would be sex. So move that over here. The next thing is you have to tell SPSS how you labeled the levels. So we go to Define Groups, and we just name them 1 and 2, level 1 and 2. 1 was male, 2 was female. Hit Continue. The testing variable, well, we're looking at fear scores. This is the sum of their day and night fear scores. All right. And everything else is set up the way you need it, so you can just hit OK. And now we can see whether men and women were different, but these are only for the people who love horror movies. I often like to type in, what I'm looking at. So later when I look at my results, my output file, I'll know. I won't have to guess. You can figure it out from this, but it's so much easier just to say, oh, these are the people who love horror movies. And you can see from this, if we look at Levine's test, we actually don't need to look at Levine's test because remember, we did that with the very first two-way ANOVA. So that's a little overkill to look at it again. So we're just going to look at equal variances, not assumed, because in the original two-way independent ANOVA, we did have a violation. And so if we look at variances not assumed equal, here is our t-value, our degrees of freedom, and our sig value. So we can see that men and women are significantly different. And if we look up here at the means, we can see that women reported being more afraid than men. And these are for people who said they love horror movies. So now we need to look at men versus women, but those who say they like horror movies. So we're going to go to data, and we're going to go to select cases, and we're going to go to the big if. And this time we're going to change horror to 2 because that's like horror movies. Hit continue, and then OK. All right, so if we were to look at our data set, now we can see that we are looking at people who like horror movies. Hate has been crossed out and love has been crossed out. We're looking at people who like them. So we're going to go back and do another independent t-test. And so you go to Analyze, Compare Means, Independent t-test. It's already set up, so we can just go ahead and hit OK. And this is, again, these are people who say they like horror. And what have we got here? Again, we don't need to look at Levine's. We already did that with the initial two-way. We did find a violation in homogeneity of variance. We are just going to look at equal variances not assumed, since that was the case with the initial two-way. And we can see that the difference is not significant. Wouldn't matter actually which one we looked at here. They're both not significant. So there is no difference between, no statistically significant difference between men and women when they like horror movies. All right, so and there are their means, their mean fear score. All right, so now we are going to select people who hate horror movies because we did love and like. So you go to data, then go right down to where it says select cases, the big if, and this time horror is 3. Hit continue, and then OK. If we look at our data, we can see, let's see, who's not selected. 1 is not selected, and lo and behold, that person said they hated horror movies. Same thing, 10's not selected, they hated horror movies. So we have told SPSS only look at the people who hate them. So now we can do our third t-test. We go to Analyze, Compare Means, Independent t-test. It's already set up. Hit OK. These are for the people who hate. I'm just double clicking next to the t-test. So it gets me into that bar where I can type. And here are the means for men and women. And again, equal variances not assumed. And we have a significant result. All right, so there is a difference between men and women. Women reported significantly more fear than men. Okay, and again, I found that by looking at the sig value. All right, so we now have answered the question, how do men and women compare? We did it separately for each type of movie. That's looking at the test of simple main effect of sex within movie attitude. So simple main effect of sex within love, simple main effect of sex within like, and simple main effect of sex within hate. All right, but now we might want to go the other way. That is, we might want to isolate just the men and compare their 3 means, love, like, and hate. All right, that would be looking at the simple main effect of movie, because we're comparing the different movie attitudes within sex, so only for men. We'll do that one first. So what we need to do is we need to go to data, and we're going to go to select cases, And this time, let's just hit reset. Instead of selecting based on horror movie, we're going to select based on sex. We want SPSS to only look at the men. So we're going to go to the big if, and this time we're going to move sex over, and we're going to say sex equals 1. We coded men as 1, women as 2. So we've just told SPSS only look at the men. So if you hit continue and then OK, if we were to look at our data set, we can see that only the men have been selected. So because we want to compare love, like, and hate, we're going to have to do a one-way independent ANOVA. So that's no longer 2 means, it's 3 or more. So that's a one-way independent ANOVA. So we go to Analyze, and you can run it from here where it says Compare Means, One-Way ANOVA. This is a one-way independent ANOVA. The dependent variable is going to be the fear scores, the sum of day and night. Move that over. The factor, well, we are comparing the love, like, and hate, so that's the horror factor. Move that over. And then we're going to ask for a post hoc test, because if we do see a significant difference between love, like, and hate, we won't know where it is. So we're going to select LSD, Shafei, and Tukey. Those are the most common ones. Hit continue. There's probably, let's click on options. Yes, we are going to want descriptive statistics. Homogeneity variance we've already looked at, so we're not going to ask for it again. This is fine here as it's set up, so just hit continue. And then hit OK. All right, so now we know what the means are for love, like, and hate. Here are the different means, sample sizes, standard deviation, standard error of the mean. All right. Here's the ANOVA itself. So for men, so we should probably type in men here. So we know that this was the men only. If we look at the ANOVA results, the degrees of freedom, 2 and 25. Here's our F value, but most importantly, we have just learned that there is a difference somewhere among the means for love, like, and hate when we're looking at the men. So we go to the post hoc tests, and I explained this in the previous video on two-way independent ANOVAs, but I'll just quickly go over it here. The 3 different post hoc tests we asked for are Tukey, Shafei, and LSD. I'll show you how to interpret Tukey because Shafei and LSD would be done the same way. If we look at love versus like and go over here, we see there is a significant difference between those 2 means. And then we can just scroll up here, love versus like, and see which mean was higher than which. So if you love horror movies, you have more fear, self-reported fear, than if you just report liking them. All right, so that's important to tell people. Just don't say there's a difference between them. Tell them which is higher and lower. So now we're going to look at love and hate. And if you scroll over, you can see that this is not significantly different, love and hate. So if we go up to our descriptives, we said love and hate are not different from each other. So here's love, 6.17, hate, 5.95. So those 2 are not significantly different. So if you love and hate horror movies, your self-reported fears are about the same. All right, and then the only other one we haven't done, because we've looked at love and like, love and hate, we haven't done like and hate. So if you look at like and hate and then follow along, you can see that they are significantly different. All right, so that means that like and hate, if we scroll up, these 2 here, if you hate horror movies, you are going to likely report significantly more fear than if you like horror movies. right? So people who love or men, I should say, men who love and hate horror movies are the ones who report more fear than those who just like them. Okay, so the last test of simple main effect that we would need to run is to isolate the women and do a one-way independent ANOVA on them. So we go to Data, select Cases, the big if, change sex to 2, so we're isolating the women, hit Continue, then OK. So now we've got, you can trust me on this, we just have the women selected. We go to Analyze, and then Compare Means, whoops, one-way ANOVA. It's already set up, so we don't need to do anything else. We just hit OK. We'll type in women up here so we don't forget. And what have we learned? Well, here are their means. Looks very similar actually to what we were seeing for the men. If we look at the ANOVA, we've run again a one-way independent, 2 and 27 degrees of freedom. Here's our F value, 18.19, our SIG value. So this ANOVA is also significant, P less than 0.05. All right, so we're going to look at the post hoc test. I have a sneaky suspicion that we are going to see the same pattern as we did for the men. So let's see, love and like. Look over here. Yes, it's significant. Love and hate. Nope. Not significantly different. People who love and hate, the women who love and hate horror movies. Like and hate. All right, let's look at these two. And yes, that is significantly different. Okay, we have a significant p-value. So what we've just learned is that if we look at the pattern, what's going on with men when they love, like, and hate horror movies, we saw that basically if you love them or hate them, you're going to report more fear. And the same pattern was observed for the women. So given that the pattern is the same for men and women, that is not the test of simple main effects we should be looking at. We would look at the first test of simple main effects, and that's the one where we ran all those t-tests. All right. When we ran all the t-tests, that's where we found different things going on between men and women depending on which type of movie they watched or reported liking. All right. So when they love horror movies, we saw that women reported more fear. Now the question is, are we going to see the same pattern here? And the answer is no. If we just look at like, there was no significant difference between men and women. So the pattern is different for like than it was for love. Over here, for people who hate horror movies, we see a difference between men and women. So because the pattern, the difference between men and women, depends on whether you love, like, or hate horror movies, that's where the interaction effect is. It's not the other tests of simple main effects. That is, when we isolated just the men and looked at their pattern of fear scores, we saw the same pattern in the women. That's not where the interaction effect is. It's with the first group of t-tests, that first test of simple main effects, where we see differences between men and women, and that difference depends on whether they loved, liked, or hate horror movies. That's what you would go on to explain. All right? So that's a lot. If you don't understand a lot of the things that I talked about, then again, check out some of the tutorials on these topics, and that will hopefully bring you up to speed. And I hope this helped.